My name is Paul Klink, and I'm from New York City. And I'm publishing a new book about workplace bullying, an extreme form of workplace bullying. And this is just a test run to get a few people to check to make sure the connection's up, get a little bit of interest in the book. I will be scheduling more Q&As. Let me see, my camera's here, right? Where's my camera? So if I look up here, I'm looking in your face, right? I'm looking you in the eye. Okay, so I'm here to look you in the eye and tell you I'm publishing an unusual new book. And I call the book Mind Rape: How Antisocials Use Deceit and Fear as Weapons of Workplace Abuse. Mind rape is a concept, and it is the title of my book. Mind rape, the concept, is about psychological abuse, I don't know how rare a form. It could be rather prevalent, but it is a form of psychological abuse so comprehensive, so extreme, so harmful in its effects upon the victims that there are many parallel effects similar to sexual rape. It does not share the physical side of sexual rape. Mind rape does not share of course, the sexual side of physical rape, although both can happen together. But my book, Mind Rape, is about one experience I had over 6.5 years plus in a workplace situation that was that extreme. It was so extreme that bullying was not an adequate word to describe it. It was so extreme that I had to search for a new term, and I looked and looked all through literature and academics and journals and psychiatric blogs and books. Psychological terrorism is probably a better descriptor of the experience I went through. And terrorism, of course, comes with terror, a fright that is so extreme that your body is just, your body's affected and your body does not really function like it should because you're too afraid. I didn't think that psychological terror was quite a book title or a term that I wanted. It wasn't pithy enough, but it also it does not convey the portion of mind rape. It does not convey the rape aspect to mind rape. So when I say rape, I use that word very carefully. I certainly do not want anybody to think that I'm equating what I went through or other people go through, equating it completely with sexual rape. Although because it is so extreme and so harmful and so painful, there are so many parallels in the effects on victims that it is a form of rape. It is non-sexual rape of a psychological, mental kind caused by verbal abuse, verbal abuse, physical menacing, being in their presence in a menacing way, um, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, bullying, every trick in the book uh, that bullies can do. And one of the reasons I'm writing the book is it puzzled me. My experience puzzled me and terrorized me so much for 6.5 years that I had to research in order to understand it. Just to survive, just to understand what was going on. I had to do this. Now, I'm going to take a pause here, and I'm going to go to another device, and I want to make sure that this stream is showing up on YouTube. By the way, anytime that you join, I don't believe we have any people joining yet, but anytime you join and you want to ask a question, I really welcome that. This is a serious topic, and I certainly don't do it lightly. I'm going to my channel. Good. So I see. I'm going to my channel. Good. So I see. Going to my. Good. So this is great. So I see that this is showing up, and I like that. What I'm going to do is set this phone off to the side, and I'm going to turn the camera. In fact, let me do this. Aha. All right. So, how to get this centered? Well, this is good. This is a good way to test out the platform. I'm going to check out something to lift up the screen a little. I do have something here that I can use. I want to be ready for people to join me. I know I'm going to lift this up, straight up and back. All right, well, that's much better. And as I turn my chair, see where I am and where am I going here? Okay, so I need to look at this. If I look at this part of the screen, if I look at that part of the screen, I believe I'm looking right at you. I'd like to look at you in the eye. And good, it's working. So let me start the production over. Again, good morning. It is Friday, June 17, 2022. My name is Paul Klenk, K-L-E-N-K. I am coming to you live from Harlem, New York City. And this is a web streaming cast about a concept of abuse and a new book on abuse. The concept of abuse, I and others have termed mind rape. And the book is titled the same. It's titled Mind Rape: How Antisocials Use Deceit and Fear as Weapons of Workplace Abuse. It's a serious topic. It is a painful topic, but I wish to make the book easy to read, enlightening. It may not be as easy to read for targets or victims of abuse, but I am not going to allow it to become a drudgery. I want it to be very fresh and exciting and paced and easy to read, whether you are a worker or a boss, whether you are a psychologist or researcher or journal academic. I really would like to make the book accessible, understandable to a very wide audience. Why am I publishing the book? It is a very important issue. I don't think there's a book quite like that. Abused people do not always come forward. In fact, they rarely come forward and just openly talk about their abuse. And in forms of abuse where shame has been used and intimidation and threats, which in my case were, victims are afraid that, coming out, talking about a former employer, that they will be, basically unemployable, and that other employees will look at them in the future and say, well, my gosh, you did this book on a company that you worked for, and now you expect us to hire you. I'm not sweating that. First of all, it is an important enough book. Second of all, it is not done in such a way that a good, decent, everyday company with, normal glitches and flaws here and there uh, should feel threatened by. I've written the book because the situation is so extreme. It is so extreme and so comprehensive that it takes a book to understand it. You see, it's actually I went through a period of abuse that was so horrific and so long term that only a book can describe it, because I need sufficient background on the people and why they did what they did, and uh, you know background and context is needed to understand a situation like mine, because of the tactics people use and because of the alliances they have within the company and the period that they've been doing it. So I'll back up again and restate what mind rape is, and I welcome anybody who's joining. I do look like I have, I think I'm the only one connected. This is fine. Um, Mind rape, the concept, is a form of abuse, often in the workplace, so comprehensive and so severe, that covers such a wide range of types of abuse: emotional, psychological, mental, um, uh, you know, terrible workplace abuse. It covers such a wide range of techniques and behaviors, not just doing one thing, but doing many, many, many things, and so coordinated and so extreme and so painful that we call it mind rape, because scientists have studied the effects on victims and they have noticed an alarming amount of parallels between mind rape and sexual rape. I'm not talking about sexual rape, but I am talking about rape. And rape is the overcoming and control of a person, often trapping them. Is trapping a rape victim is often very part of what a rapist has to do, although sometimes sexual abuse and molestation can be kind of a drive-by. But during the rape itself, the victim is carried away. I mean, they are raped in the sense of the raped in the Sabine Hills, Lucretia. They are controlled. They are held outside their will and outside their ability to escape it. So the abuse, in sexual rape, the physical abuse inflicted on a person is very sexual, and the rape portion of it has to do with being gripped and controlled and held during the act or during the period which the act is taking place. So in the sense of a workplace abuse, mental or psychological abuse in the workplace, what people do not understand is that victims cannot leave. They are controlled to the point where they cannot leave. They have no other alternatives. At least they have been gaslighted to believe that they can't. Gaslighting is a term to use that certain measures have been taken, deliberate measures, to deceive a person so that they have a wrong view of reality. Um, as in the movie, someone thought that somebody was, tampering with the house and turning lights on and off. And it was the husband, but the wife didn't know. She was unaware of who was doing the gaslighting or what the gaslighting entailed. Gaslighting, and I've just read a definition of this recently that is, I think, more satisfactory than most I have read. Gaslighting is a very favorite tactic of bullies, and we're going to define it in a bit of a narrow way. We're going to define gaslighting as changing a person's perceived reality to something that is deceptive and wrong and unfactual, so that they can be controlled and manipulated and made to feel afraid. The purpose of mind rape is to create fear, great fear. That's one of the goals. I'm not saying it is a rational goal. Mind rapists and abusers and sexual abusers are not rational in the sense that we understand it. They do not have they are not doing productive good things for an end, for a logical end. In fact, one of the crazy things about mind rape is that while it's happening, I discovered in my 6.5 years of the sort of called the abduction, in my 6.5 years of being stuck in the situation, I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. I was completely puzzled, absolutely puzzled. It was torture to try to figure out what was going on. Part of it is when people abuse you at work in this way, verbal abuse and bullying. They're doing it to put you off guard. They're doing it to frighten you. They're doing it to intimidate you. And so when intimidation is being inflicted on you, and fear and terror is being inflicted on you, right away your cognitive functions are not going to work like they should be at that moment, right? At that moment, your brain is unable to actually rationally figure things out and take the right choice. And again, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a clinician, and I'm not an academic. But according to my doctor, and this is a doctor who testifies in court on a lot of abuse cases, um, when this kind of confusion is happening, when the extreme event, the frightening experience, the startling, the yelling, the ambushes, when in the midst of when they're happening, in the midst of when they're happening, what your mind is going through, and hear this, is the exact textbook definition of temporary insanity. That is the precise courtroom criminal evidentiary um, um, term. That is what's going on. Is exactly what temporary insanity is. It can happen in a very short moment. You can go temporarily insane. You can put in a state of mind where your mind is temporarily sane and temporarily insane in the clinical sense of the word, in the scientific sense of the word that is used in courts. So when we talk about temporary insanity, we're talking about that moment when the onslaught is happening and it's like you're on your back in the middle of the street, laying down in the concrete, and somebody's on top of you, bashing you and lying to you and making you believe some things that are not true. So you're really confused. At that moment, you cannot really behave rationally. You really cannot choose rational, sane responses. That moment, when that happens to you, you are probably experiencing temporary insanity. Classic, plain vanilla, textbook, courtroom temporary insanity. And I'm in touch with researchers and specialists and writers, and I believe I'm correct when I say, and I would invite anybody to correct me, that that when these traumas occur, then later on, when traumas are triggered, post-trauma events trigger, which causes stress, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, your brain is actually doing the same thing and experiencing the same pain and the same trauma, the same state of mind as you were when you were being attacked. If you look at the brain waves, you can't tell a difference between what you were going through when the attack was occurring during the trauma and what you were going through when it was triggered and you were feeling it. as far as I can know, my research, my reading, I don't call it researcher, I'm a reader. My reading has indicated that that is the same. The brain is doing the same thing, and that in effect you are again experiencing a moment of temporary insanity. Now, I'd like to have meet enough people so that I can have a good variety of experts to discuss this. Since the book is a work in progress, I really want it to be a very good book. It is written by a layman, and I'm very clear that I'm writing as a layman. But I've had very good guides online, many different experts like Dr. Ramani Durvasula, many others, to help me understand this phenomenon. And um, part of my effort, part of my experience of writing the book is vetting the book. When the book comes out in its final form, it may come out in a draft form. When the book comes out in its final form, I want it vetted. I want it already vetted by as many psychiatrists and researchers and doctors and clinicians and experts and behavioralists as I can. The study of behavior is a huge study, and the study of bullying and mind rape and psychological terror in the workplace. There's an enormous research being done. We are learning hard science about this year after year after year, and it's great. We are There's so much knowledge that we don't even have access to. One of the problems, however, is that when it's taken the form, when it happens by executives, let's say when executives and managers, let's just call it bullying and extreme bullying for the moment, when managers who engage in extreme bullying, it would be great if we could study them, right? We could put 1,000 of them in rooms and watch and behave and analyze and rerun things and really look carefully at what they do. You know, abusers are not prone to volunteer for these kind of clinical studies. They're not going to show up. And another aspect of the book, which is serious and alarming and a sort of a wonky topic that needs to be carefully looked at. I want it to handle carefully. We need to look at the topic of psychiatric disorders, of personality disorders, such as antisocial personality disorder, defined in the DSM, narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathy, psychopathy, or we call sociopaths and psychopaths. Sociopath and psychopath are not clinical terms. They are colloquialisms used to describe types of antisocial people. Now, in order to be classified as having antisocial personality disorder, there is a rigorous and careful study that needs to be taken of the person. It has to be done by a psychiatrist or a psychologist or trained person. I'm not qualified to diagnose personality disorders. I'm not qualified to label somebody as having antisocial personality disorder as far as the book definition. However, I am, and you are qualified when you study to recognize behaviors and call them out as antisocial behaviors. They're antisocial behaviors, and the people are antisocial people. They're antisocials, the noun. Or they're antisocial people, which is antisocial being an adverb. So it is perfectly acceptable to use these words: antisocial, psychopathic, sociopathic, narcissist. It is perfectly acceptable for lay people to use these terms, and they're perfect descriptors. They are only descriptors, and they're not meant to diagnose. So don't be afraid if somebody tells you, you can't know that and you can't diagnose that. It's like you don't have to. You don't have to know it. You don't have to diagnose it. So, um, so that's that. Um, what else can I tell you? This is a great opportunity. I'm gonna break soon so that I can go back and listen to this online. Um, my book is actually an expose. In my book, I'm naming names. These are people I've worked with recently, and a company I've worked for recently. In the book, I will be naming names, first and last names, and companies and titles of the people who abused me and the people who allowed it to happen, who sponsored it, who encouraged it, who held back any discipline when it occurred. Um, this is crazy. So let's try to talk about Mind Rape, the book. Mind Rape, how antisocials use deceit and fear as weapons of workplace abuse. This book is a true story by me, told in real time like it happened. It is completely truthful. It is factual. I'm being very careful to describe things very accurately, very precisely. It is about real people in a real city, in a real company, doing real jobs. Still at the company, still doing those jobs. It is an expose. It is written to expose them and expose them for the purpose of stopping the behavior, bringing them to some sort of discipline, a satisfactory discipline, according to the relevant authorities in the institution and elsewhere. And it is written, I'm writing it to help victims because as a victim, I was so confused, so puzzled, I was so vexed, I could not make sense. I could not make sense of what was happening to me. I just could not make sense of it. Um, and see, that makes the pain worse because since gaslighting is involved, you don't have the full picture, a full truthful picture, and sometimes you doubt yourself. The crazy thing about the abuse I went through is that for the first period, and I would say, let me guess, it was about 6 months, horrible, just a horrible introduction to this behavior by these three people. Um, I was so perplexed, I would stand outside the office at night, just staring out on the street, trying to figure out what I went through, because I knew that the yelling that occurred that day would be coming again the next day, and that it would be on the same topics, and I would need to be ready to give an answer. This is the crazy thing. This is just was a mind blower to me. One of the biggest initial milestones in figuring out what was going on. Part of the abuse takes place with just general, really bad rudeness, really rude behavior toward the victim, toward the target. Very rude, openly rude. The kind of rudeness that you would really notice if you were to walk by and overhear it. You would just like, can't believe that person's being so rude to that secretary, right? This whole layer of rudeness and abuse. There's another layer of constant criticism. Nothing's ever right. Something's always wrong. It's always your fault. You can't defend yourself. You can't explain it. You're not supposed to explain it. You're just supposed to accept that you're being told that you've been wrong. No way of knowing, no way of checking, just wrong. Made a mistake. Yelled at. You try to answer. You try to ask a question about it. You get swapped. You get slapped verbally and told that you are being argumentative and uncooperative and insubordinate. So when a boss uses those terms to you, they're criticizing you, yelling. They will not accept your input or discussion or questions, and then they are characterizing your questions as argumentative, you know, non-cooperative, insubordinate. Those terms are fireable offenses. You can get fired for insubordination. You can get fired for arguing with the boss, and see what the boss is doing by using those terms, by accusing you, accusing you. The boss is wearing you down to be afraid to speak up and defend yourself. And anybody and everybody makes little errors, typos, small things, big things, not major things, but just any sort of little mistake or twitch or error in work. We go back, we correct it, we look at each other's work. People do that. It's normal for everybody, and mistakes should be pointed out and corrected right away, and they shouldn't be repeated. However, in the form of these people, the criticism, the onslaught of slander and accusation of my work was so oppressive, I couldn't even think straight. Again, lots of yelling, been a fog, the mind unable to really take a moment and listen to it rationally. Getting to the mind blower. I can't believe this happened. One day in all the midst of this, one more episode that something wasn't right and I was being yelled at, and somebody was stomping away and angry at me and threatening me. Oh my gosh. I had a moment to think. I had actually a moment to wipe away that fog of confusion. And I noticed something. They were lying to me. They were lying to me. And they knew they were lying to me. And not just saying they got their facts straight. I mean, they knew they were wrong. They knew I hadn't done the wrong thing. And they still did it. And this person's co-abuser was always accusing her of being a liar. I mean, you're such a liar. That was that was very common to hear, but I didn't process it. And the moment when I learned that it was a lie, simultaneously I just became absolutely dumbfounded and outraged, and also exhilarated at being vindicated for likely so many past lies and accusations. I can't tell you what that did to me in that moment. My boss was lying to me? No, I had been with her for that time for 3 to 6 months. I hadn't had a chance to really experience everything and see all the repertoire of her abuse over a long period. After 6.5 years, I had. And this person, when I started working for her and her co-abusers, they had literally been working together for 30 years. Almost all of those 30 years in that same position, doing the same thing. And I, the secretary, doing the same thing, the same work their past secretaries had done. And they were mistreated too. So I came into a situation with a revolving door of assistants, mostly temps for a while, and an assistant was fired and sued and purportedly settled. Crazy. 30 years of abuse. 20 years when I got there. They've been there 31 years now. I worked for them for 6.5 years. So I began in a situation where they had a jump start on practicing against assistants for 6.5 years. And they were notorious for this throughout the company, throughout our corporate headquarters. They were notorious. Almost everyone knew. I believe just about everyone knew of some of the wrongdoing and abuse. Many people knew about one aspect of the sad story is substance abuse, which was a raging alcoholic, and I'm telling you, it was crazy. He was a drunk doing this. He was a drunk, and I wasn't even aware until much later that person had been drinking on the job. So, it was crazy to experience this. Let's see if I can get a mute here. So, this is a crazy situation. Uh, Part of the challenge in the book, and I'm a pretty good writer. I want it to be a very good book. I want it to sell. Um, Part of the challenge is to describe all of this in a way that can easily be read by just about anyone and easily understood, accurately understood. I don't want the book to be so weighed down in pain and litanies of complaints that it becomes boring. From the perspective of a reader, it should be very exciting because to explain the behavior and to explain the people, I'm going to have to go into their backgrounds and how they came to work together and where they came from and who started it all and who oversaw it all and who a lot of the proxies and sponsors and players were. It's going to be a necessary part of the expose to show that, because if you don't have that context, it's really hard to understand why three people doing this is quite to the level of requiring a book, and a book is required. This is bad news. So here I am writing an expose about a recent job I had for 6.5 years for a very large, well-known company. Uh, Three very exceptionally talented, high-level people, a trio of abusers who had been coordinating their abuse for years, 20 years before I started, almost. And now I'm going public. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Bullies thrive on fear, they depend on fear. They count on their victims to be silent. They count on their victims for not having recourse. Now, I don't think this is quite true, but much of what they do is thought to be legal, is, said by many people to be legal. What they're doing is completely legal, technically. That is, it's very hard to get a conviction of any kind of a crime or misdemeanor on these actions. So what they've done is they've found a way to skirt the laws and harassment laws, although frankly they are guilty. I mean, they have committed crimes, I believe, and many, 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 you know, wrongful offenses according to the law and guidelines. But the rate, abusers, lots of these abusers in the workplace get by with it because it's very hard to prove anything happened, to prove any damage, to prove that there was a crime or misdemeanor. It's really impossible, and that's one of the reasons I'm writing a book, is because for the moment I don't need to charge them with a crime. You see, I can bring them to justice my own way, legally and ethically, by writing a book about it and just naming the names. That's legal. I can write about my experience. I can write about my life. I'm allowed to do that. And there's nothing they can do about it except possibly try to get some injunctions against the book, which I will have slapped down. So, in a type of situation where the crime and the wrongdoing is seemingly not suable or prosecutable, right? Temporarily, in lieu of that, I am writing a book, and I hopefully book will have the same effect, that it will stop their behavior. It will alert their current victims of what they're going through. It'll teach others. It will get the company to make some changes. It'll have all, hopefully, the same effects. And on top of it, I won't have to um, go through the ridiculous courtroom procedure of proving things that even when I prove them, and I could prove them, proving things that when I prove them, there's nothing really the law can do about it. You see, the law has been written to make it easy for them to do this, and they're very good at getting by with it without stepping over the line and technically breaking the law. Caveat, I believe they have stepped over those lines a lot. And I believe sometimes it was to cover up for wrongdoing, which is even worse. Other wrongdoing, financial wrongdoing, malfeasance, record keeping, fraud, forgery, however you want to call that. Okay, so a lot of times bullies are using bullying as a shield and a cover and a protection against the victims who watch them perform wrongful acts. And they do the bullying to intimidate them into silence and to make them afraid of their job, afraid to believe what they saw with their own eyes. And that's one of the reasons why the book is going to be effective, I think. I do want it to be a good book. I hope you'll follow me. I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to archive this, and for those of you who look at this in the future, thank you. It was, I think, hopefully the audio is picking up, and I'm able to do this well. And I happen to want to have some Q&As on a regular basis on this channel, and give you insights, answer your questions, and talk to experts and flesh out the book in a way that I know that when you buy it and read it, you will really get a kick out of it. I'm going to come out with it in hardcover and softcover and e-Kindle. It deserves to be a hardcover book. I've got a beautiful book design. But I know for the sake of people affording it, it's going to have to come out in paperback too. And I do want to have a price point which is worthy of the book, that will sell and that will make me some sort of an income. I would like to sell a lot of copies. I want to sell a lot of books. I think that would be, as a writer, a good thing. So again, this is Paul Klenk. Today is, what day is today? The 17th. Today is the 17th of June, Friday, 17th of June, 2022. It is now 7:08 in the morning, Eastern Time. My name is Paul Klenk. I'm coming out from Harlem, New York City, on the Upper West Side. And this has been an introduction to the concept of mind rape and a new book that I'm writing called Mind Rape: How Antisocials Use Deceit and Fear as Weapons of Workplace Abuse, by Paul Klenk, K-L-E-N-K. And please subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell, and you'll be notified. And I will set up ways for you to be told when the book is getting ready to come out, when it's published. Hopefully, I'll find an agent that can get a good publisher, but if not, I'll just publish it myself for the time. And I thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to end the broadcast now. Thank you for joining me. Good luck. God bless you.